Hi, welcome to our webinar today. Thank you for joining us. We're going to talk about the MITRE ATT&CK Framework for ICS. Joining us today is Yannis Stavro from our security research team. Yannis, would you introduce yourself, please?
Hello, everyone. My name is Yannis Stavro, and I'm a member of the security research team here in Nozomi. My role in the team is security research that involves tasks like creating signatures for threats, reverse engineering protocols, and also focusing on research projects like encryption and threat modeling.
Great, and I'm Chris Grove, the technology evangelist here at Nozomi Networks, and today's discussion is going to be a mix of some high-level information about the ATT&CK framework, as well as a little bit about how our product overlaps with it and some of the importance of this particular framework. So without further ado, and at the end of this, we will have some QA time available as well, and some further research available. So Yannis, how would you like to begin our session today? You want to just introduce the MITRE framework at a very high level?
Yeah, sure. So the MITRE is basically a framework that is mainly used for threat modeling. What is the idea? The idea is to collect a lot of attacks that have actually happened in the world, and then create a collection of tactics and techniques that the adversaries are using that were created from these attacks. So basically, it's a catalog of attacks that it's assembled together that then you have to use to your own infrastructure to understand how an attack can be utilized, how people think about approaching your infrastructures, etc. So the main idea is you create this knowledge base and you provide it to the companies to utilize them to create defense mechanisms that orient around these attacks techniques. So basically, MITRE has created this collection by looking around in ICS. And here I have to make the distinction that MITRE has already such an array for the enterprise world. So there's already such a matrix for the classic enterprise as we know it, but there is also a MITRE matrix for the ICS now. So to give you an example of how this works is that we have a list of tactics. Those are generic approaches that provide the adversary some kind of, think of it as movement or action inside your network. For example, one tactic is initial access or another tactic is evasion. Both are categories that describe, first of all, how the adversary managed to get into your organization. And for example, the evasion tactic is how he managed to hide himself. Now, technique in the same fashion is the method that provided the adversary with its goal. So, for example, in the initial access, is about how he was able perhaps to have the engineering working station. So maybe that was his entry point, possibly, for example, with a USB. And in the evasion approach, the method to evade detection would be that he used, for example, a rootkit after he get initial access. So you see, if you put all these pieces together, you create a map of action that the adversary used to achieve its goal. So this framework, generically speaking, is set up in such a way that it reflects on what adversaries do. The main point of the ICS framework, and basically the reason that it exists, is that initially MITRE thought to create a few categories about the special OT environment and add it to the IT, the enterprise matrix. But they soon find out that there are a lot of differences from the OT field to the IT field, and this seems like a new matrix is required to be created. So a few things that are different is that the motivation of the attacker in the ICS is different than the IT. For example, now in the OT we have operational technology, we have processes, we have machinery moving around, we have people working with machinery, we have safety systems, and all these things provide a different objective for the adversary. For example, if I want to disable a PLC, that's a different story than just implement and execute a ransomware in an IT station. The technology is different, the code is different, how this product is commissioned and sent to the client, the process is different, the chain of creation is different, and all this stuff describes that we have to think of the OT in a different way. Another approach that you can think of is the life cycle of the attack is different. For example, in the OT, the attacker is going to think all the common elements of the IT, like I have to access the workstation, I have to jump to the next workstation, but then he reaches the OT environment, is going to think of, okay, I have to impair the safety system, the one that provides the safety, or I have to disable the PLC, the one that makes the actions, the actuators, and all the stuff move around. So all this technology requires a new perspective. That's why the matrix provides elements that are different from the IT, like the impair process control tactic or the impact tactic, like what is the impact of the attack? Do they lost visibility in the process? Do they lost part of the process? There was any damage in the equipment? And all these different factors. So overall, the approach here of the MITRE is let's put together what everything is out there that we know, that we already see in the industry, collect it together in this collection, provide it to everyone. And basically what we try to achieve here is, first of all, to create a base knowledge from real world scenarios. They also provide to create a common language of communication, a common lexicon that is used by the framework. And also they try to provide to the enterprise, to the organization, the possibility to be able to threat model their own infrastructure, to understand which are the gaps, which are the potential initial access points, and of course all the other factors in the framework, so they can tune their safety systems around this approach.
Thanks. One of the things that you brought up was a lot of the differences between the enterprise and the ICS framework. You know, the enterprise one starts with the reconnaissance phase, and this one starts slightly different with like initial access. Can you go into a little more detail around those differences and the approach in very early stages?
Yes, so basically we can think that OT and IT, first of all, are blended together, right? So if you navigate inside an organization, you try to check, first of all, the IT environment, okay? If we think of the BERT model and the SCADA infrastructure, in the higher levels of the model, you have the historians, you have the workstations, you have the DMZs and the access to the internet and the firewalls. So you can think of the first stage of your attack will be exactly the same as the stage as we have in the enterprise bots, so reconnaissance and all the stuff from the scanning, the potential pivot points. So where the model comes in? The model comes in when we are going lower to the Purdy model and go to the operational side. So you use your techniques to go inside the IT infrastructure. You manage to get one pivot point, maybe the historian, maybe another point to get to the OT side. Now things change, right? Now every new aspect is considered around the operational process. So now the mindset is different. We have to regulate for that. So it's not like the other steps are excluded from the process. It would say, ideally, what's the idea is if we want to use both the frameworks, the enterprise and the ICS, to model an organization, then we will take the first one for the IT side, and then when we jump to the OT, we're going to take the second one. So this is going to give you the full picture. But again, in the ICS world, many of the tools and techniques that are used are the same with IT, because we have integrated technology, we have the Ethernet, we have the workstations. We still look at the same side of things. It's just the target, the objectives, and the steps that someone is taking are slightly different. That's why we need this different representation of things.
Yeah, that makes total sense. We have a lot of customers that are getting on board with this new framework, and there's a lot of buzz around it for sure. What do you think is the reason that this should be important to our customers?
Yeah, so basically the idea is quite rational. It says we have a lot of threat model techniques like STRAT and attack trees, and the majority of them stands in the realm of concept, abstraction. Let's think about an approach, let's try and model it. And sometimes it's questionable how useful are those techniques. So in a sense, you need a threat modeling approach. You need to threat model to make your risk matrices, to understand what is happening, what is going to be your issue, where I have to keep my attention, because everything revolves around risk assessment and the cost that you have to pay. So the good thing about the MITRE is that it gives you this vision of what actually is happening out there. So it's not an abstract idea. Here are the cases, here are the facts, this is how they did it. Then you have all this knowledge inside in your infrastructure. So basically, when the time comes to put the money on and to regulate your risk, you might use the framework to understand, okay, what I can cover, what are my blind spots. If this is the high probability, then I can pay more money, let's say, to cover this side of things, less money for this side of things. So it can provide a good value if you utilize it correctly. The concept of real experience is really strong in this environment because it shows exactly how things are done. It goes beyond that an exceptional event happened or something totally new was created. So I believe most organizations should be worried more about that stuff. So from that point of view, it makes total sense that it should be utilized to some extent.
Yep, totally agree. So in your role as a threat researcher and analyst and all the other cool stuff that you get to do throughout the week, how do you feel this plays into what you do in your role outside of just talking about the framework? How does this impact you and your operations?
Yeah, so from my perspective, it's very useful to have the actual knowledge of what's happening out there, because it allows me to focus also my resources and time as to what is important. Okay, for example, if I'm looking for detection tool, to detect attacks, or if I'm looking for tools or how to integrate them with my systems, I'm going to think around what is the impact of my work, perhaps reasoning with the MITRE. I have a lot of approaches, but MITRE could be one of the reasonings. So for example, if I know that the majority of the attacks happens because the workstation XYZ was compromised because of an exploit, I might think, oh, okay, this is the common way. There is a reason why this is happening. It's more convenient. Maybe the USB approach is more convenient for everyone. So what it does, it sets my mindset as to what should I look for and what should I pay more attention to. Another thing that is supportive to me to the whole experience is to understand also what the attacker is looking for, and what basically, if we think the attackers as a red team and blue team, in my word, that is the attacking team and the defense team, this creates a common language for all the teams, right? So we have now, let's say, a common lexicon between us. So what we can do right now is start producing materials and tools that integrate with each other. So we can now, I can just create, detection scheme. Maybe I have, let's say, an artificial intelligence method to detect ransomware, and then I can flag it with this technique. So maybe someone does not have my method, my technology to do that, but he knows that my detection has to do with something compared to data compromisation or something like that. So suddenly, abstract ideas or special techniques go are mapped to the network, to the framework, and then we can go case by case and integrate those together. So that's also something very useful. Overall, what I like is that it gives me this possibility to communicate also what I'm trying to. So what it does to me is it forces me to look down to tools and tactics and APTs and see how they were deployed in the organization. So I'm going to see step by step what was the intrusion point, what were the steps that were taken, what was each spot that they used, and understand not only the mindset, but most importantly, what are the problems, what are the holes inside the organization that allow this step to happen. So then you can reflect and see, okay, how they identified those, what was the issues, how we're able to establish this kind of foothold. And all this approach generally enhances my ability to do better work at putting the correct detection mechanisms to be able to identify those spots.
So in a way, it's a sort of a, the IT/OT convergence, and we have different languages going on many times. We have the OT engineering side of the house with all of their different technologies, and then you have the IT side. This sort of brings both of those together. We had the enterprise that only did the IT, but now there's a way that we can actually make something from a cybersecurity standpoint makes sense to the industrial control system engineers and maintenance and the people that are responsible for those systems, but also have it make sense to a SOC. So can you talk about how SOC operations are going to benefit from the framework, from particularly the ICS framework?
Yeah, so in a sense of SOCs, one would be the point that I mentioned before, which is the integration of tools. So what you can imagine is if you have, let's say, your IDS system and your antivirus system, and they both have a common point of information and they communicate those parameters and tags, then the point is that you can utilize all these points together to your report or your logging system to understand what is happening now in my infrastructure. So it's not like now I have an abstract alert that I'm not sure exactly what it means in one tool, and there is another alert in another tool, and all this does not make sense. Now you put it all together, and you might see the points of action, and maybe you start to create. If we put advanced methodologies, to create the map of action, and you see, okay, so the first tool did this alert, and the second tool produced this alert. So this was intrusion probably. This is probably some kind of evasion technique. So you put everything together, and you understand. You have a better visibility of what is happening. So this integration, I think, it's quite important. Another thing is that basically the framework is very successful as communicating stuff simply. So it's not like a detection can be complicated. Like I will produce the name of the malware, or maybe some other information that is quite technical. Then you have to research for it, do the work, and understand what happened exactly. But now, upon this information, it's going to be an extra bit of, hey, this is data destruction technique or something like that. So maybe new people newly introduced in the industry, maybe in the SOC field, that are not very familiar with all this material that's out there, can help themselves, because now they can understand better or simpler. Okay, I don't know much about the technical details of this XYZ exploit, but I read here, hey, this is something that destroys data. So I don't know anything else, but I have to report to someone and understand that someone is now destroying my data. So we don't have to downgrade the importance of communication to this kind of issues. So I think that not simplification, but better communication by narrowing the events to specific points, it's going to help a lot, and specifically SOC operators that are not that experienced.
Yeah, totally agree. It really, yeah, that simplifies the language needed to describe the impact of these different attacks and so forth. So what are some of the overall advantages you think we're going to get in cybersecurity if this is adopted widely? How do you think it's going to help in general?
So in general, I think that it's going to allow us to understand how the industry evolved around these attacks, and create a better understanding of what tools do we need to implement and how to improve them in this newly advanced world of ICT security, cybersecurity. I think that the major benefit, as I said, has to be the common language over the framework. I have to argue that there are some critique points about the framework that we can make right now. That, for example, in the ICI's world, this framework is new. So one point would be that there is not a lot of test cases compared to the IT MITRE scenario. But still, I would say that this thing is evolving. A lot of material is data day by day. We can see an exponential growth of attacks happening in the ICS field, just because the technology is more and more exposed, and it's much more, of interest for people. So I think right now is a good starting point, let's say, to follow the integration of the framework, because this is going to support us navigate better into what we have to implement to make people more secure.
Yep, very cool. So what about, we were talking a little bit earlier, not on this call, but previous to this, about heat maps, and I thought that was very interesting. Do you want to go into some details about the?
Oh yeah. So the point about the heat map is basically is a risk evaluation matrix of a lot of things. Basically, in the specific context, is the heat map of the techniques and tactics that are used. So basically, this is an approach that can be used. Now you have your matrix, you have your techniques, you have your tactics. What you can do now is start to create statistics and think about, okay, which is the most common approach, which is the most common method that they use. So this is going to the red side of things, of the green side of things, which is less used. So basically, the heat map is a tool that can be used to exploit better the framework, so that you can focus even in more specialized topics in your field. One thing that might come from experience is that because the IT and the OT frameworks mainly are different, but they have common elements, maybe what we can do is think of what is happening in IT, in the common elements, and bring the experience to the OT. And then we can put everything together and have the similar rationale as to how we can use this framework. So basically, it's just an approach, an enhancement tool that you can use over the existing knowledge base.
Very cool. Yep. So is there anything else you want to bring up about the ICS framework? Or
the only thing I would like to point is, I mentioned a little bit about the critique points. The only thing I would like to mention is a little part of the cumbersome complexity that is in this framework. It brings together a little bit about my technical expertise as our idea solution, is that basically the framework cannot be integrated by, let's say, one solution, one cybersecurity solution, one defense product. And mainly because the reason is because there are partly two reasons. One is that many of these tactics and techniques are corresponding to different fields. For example, one technique can be visible to the network, one other technique cannot be visible to the network. One technique can be visible to the workstation, one other technique cannot be visible to another workstation, XYZ. For example, it might be that you deployed something from a USB. Okay, so whatever is happening to this workstation is not visible to the network to the point where this workstation is going to talk to the network, to another workstation. So this basically creates the the problem that there is no golden solution that can integrate everything. We have to think, and that's the benefit of the integrations. We have to think how this is going to be solved, and it's like we have to think what solutions you're going to pick that they're going to use the framework for your benefit. So you have to think, I have to have the antivirus that's going to support this, which is on the workstation. Then I have to have the IDS system, which is going to support my network infrastructure, and so on and so forth. So the benefits are there, and they are great, but we still need some consideration about the complexity and the difficulties of implementing such a network out in the wild. But I think for sure that the benefits are much more than the drawbacks.
So essentially, there's no silver bullet in cybersecurity. Once again, yeah, this is a common theme, obviously, in our space, that there's no one thing that's going to do everything for you. So yeah, I do know that we've been working diligently on our side to get our product in line with the framework and support it as much as possible in several areas in our product. I think you guys recently did a webinar on some of those things, and I know we have a bunch more stuff coming out in the future. Do you want to share some details about what we do today and how we can add some information in, and then we'll probably move on to QA?
Yeah, for sure. So currently what we do is we do our classic analysis detection. So we create signatures for all the threats that we found out there, or we curate signatures from other sources, or whatever approach we prefer. What we add to this is we do the extra step of analyzing the detection mechanism or the threat, and understand in which of those techniques that approach holds on. So how it's working now is that when you have an alert, it's gonna be sided with one of those tags that map in the technique, and that gives you the visibility of, okay, I see this alert, in which technique of the matrix this holds on. Now, it can be the scenario that there is an alert that has multiple of those, depending of how the exploit, what was the specific target of the exploit, or maybe there are more than one techniques that fit into one alert, or one let's say one attempt of execution of a threat. So currently what we do is we populate our database with all the tags, and we try to solve the problem of what is happening here, what's the attack and what's the target, and make this conversion to the matrix comfortable to the user to see.
Perfect. Yeah. So today, they can, SOC operators are able to see exactly what you're discussing in the content of the alerts, and they're able to see to which MITRE categories that particular alert might be in regards to. And yeah, we have some. So the future is looking bright for I think this framework, because it's needed, and it's the first real iteration of it, and I think. I think that it's got a better place on the ICS side than maybe on the enterprise side. There's a lot going on there. There's a lot of thought leadership, and there's competing frameworks, but there's not a lot here on the ICS side, and definitely we need it. So I think the timing is right for this. And so shall we move on to the QA session? You good for that?
Perfect.
All right, live fire time, right? All right, so we have a question from Marcelo. What percentage of the MITRE attack threats are in the security signatures on Guardians and the threat intelligence subscription? So you want to take that, or do you want me to take that one? Or
I think both. So the question is the signatures in Guardian and the engine. Okay.
How much do we?
I'm not sure exactly. I'm not sure about the percentage. I think both provide tagging right now. I curate specifically the threat intelligence, and I would say that right now we are in the process of moving all the signatures into the knowledge base. But I'm not sure exactly. I would say all of them. I would say all of them. Maybe a few are not still in the process of being complete, but should be. The majority of them has to have the tags by now, or something like that.
I know we did a big effort to go backwards and apply the framework to things that we already had. And then I know that new stuff that we're releasing, including what's coming in our threat intel feed, has the new information, the MITRE ATT&CK signature stuff there with it. So yeah, what percentage? That'd be hard to say at this time, but no one out there is going to be at 100. Like Giannis mentioned earlier, some of the stuff is in the physical sphere, some of the stuff is cyber, and no one tool is going to be able to do everything. So it's going to definitely take a combination of tools and layers, and being able to see all that, and having a good security posture and good forensics capabilities, and a lot of these other benefits that Guardium brings when it's deployed isn't necessarily directly mapped to MITRE, but helps navigate MITRE and helps to understand a lot of things that may not be listed there. Question from Andre: how does Nozomi correlate the alerts generated by Guardium with MITRE? Do you want to take that one, Giannis, or you want to...
Please respond, Chris, because as far as I'm concerned, we produce in the alert front in the UI an extra note below the description of the alert that has the codes, the tagging codes of the matrix. Now, I think the majority of the codes is in the form of T800 something something, which the something something is the small number which describes the technique. And also we provide a text that repeats the name and of the tactic and the technique for each alert we produce.
Right. Yep. Okay. Next question from Marcelo. The description of the signature that coincides with a threat on the MITRE attack will be pointed against the MITRE attack on the alert over the Guardian. I'm sorry, I'm not fully understanding that one. I think he's asking what we just answered, which is, will these signatures coincide with the alerts coming from Guardian? I'll take that one.
Yeah.
I think
it goes for the... Okay, what can I say that I don't remember if we have the full, so every tactic and technique has a description, like a text that brings together with it. I'm not sure if we print the full description. I think no, I think we print only the name of the tactic, but they have
yeah, okay, maybe just submit the description. All right.
If that's the question, if that's the question.
Yeah, yeah. We have categories in Nozomi such as VI new link or signature network scan. Nozomi has a map for correlations to it. I think.
Yeah. Wanna take it?
So I think that. Go ahead. Sorry, you.
Sure. So what I think, so this VI new links is our own way of tagging categories of attacks. So this is our own system as to how our IDS will tag a specific event inside the traffic. This is not connected with the MITRE network. What we do is we go to these events because, for example, a new link, it's not maybe meaningful in the MITRE scheme of things because a new node doesn't mean that it's let's say a tactic or the technique. But maybe if that new node is an intrusion point in the future, so maybe then it's a tactic technique. So we have to do this correlation correctly, right? Because if I create a new node and maybe I connect to the PC and then I move it, it doesn't mean that this was an aggressive action. If this continues to be an aggressive action, then I have to do the tagging to know what happened. So it depends. We try to, there is not a one-on-one connection between our tagging system and the MITRE. The concept is a little bit different because we try to do our asset identification. So this does not always correspond to malicious action.
Right, exactly. Okay, thank you. Next question here is from Kim. So how would you compare this to something like the Cyberkill Chain model in terms of usefulness and scope?
Yeah, so you can say that are very, very similar. Basically, you can say that the matrix is a collection, let's say, of Cyberkill chains, but they are not in order, right? It's not like you have to follow all these tactics to go to the last step. So the difference is that your Cyberkill chain is going to provide you the knowledge in a specific event that happened at some point. This does not help you as a generic point before the event. It has to happen after the fact. So it's more like a forensic analysis and a threat analysis of what happened. And it's a tool that you can utilize totally in correlation with the MITRE ICS. So you can imagine that you would like to fit your Cyberkill chain map line into the map of the matrix. I would say that would make total sense.
Okay, great. Next question is from Bashir. Do you have a specification language to describe signatures and threat modeling? And do we have a mapping method to translate the signatures to the tactics in MITRE? And do we have some mapping method to translate to tactics in MITRE? Yeah, that's the question. So I guess it's more of a back-end question, maybe. Do we have a method for doing that and for doing the translations before they're published?
Well, there is not an automatic approach, if that's the question. So what is working for us right now is we do the analysis, we understand what is the problem, what's the exploit, what's the tool, and then we decide which is the correct correlation. And this goes for every tagging that is visible to us, right? Because there are some tags that are not visible to the network. You have to have visibility elsewhere. So yeah, so how that's important. As I referenced the example before with the new node sample, is like that you have to be smart, right? You cannot just bring an alert everywhere and say, okay, this is in the MITRE, this is in the MITRE, put everything in the MITRE. This is not how it works. So if there's a new node and the new node was maybe created from a tool like Nmap or something, you have to have a small reasoning to understand what is happening there, and then you have to decide which is going to be your tagging suggestion. It all comes down to what analysis you have done. I'm quite sure right now nothing works generically like a generic approach. You go case by case. There are some categories that go to generic approaches, like some maybe a standard remote execution exploit, which is like an SMB or something, which is something that goes to the remote execution tag, and it's something that you expect to do. But there are other stuff or other events that do not directly map. So we just do it by hand.
Mm-hmm. Great. Next question from Murtaz is, would you be able to walk us through the methodology you use to map some of the attack TTPs to our solution? Can you give us an example? I think we talked about Triton. Maybe it's a good one.
Yeah, sure. Well, Triton may be an example we can do about it.
Or whichever one you like.
Simply would be an example would be like, okay, first thing is entry of the workstation. Okay, so it's gonna be like someone put the USB, the malware was put it on. It's now the workstation is infected. And we saw nothing because everything is in a laptop or workstation, no communication. Suddenly, you connect this device to the network, and you start looking for the Triconix workstation, so the Triconix sys. So at this point, what is happening is that we detect the traffic, right? Because we know we have the signatures, we have the behavior, so we start spamming alerts. So right now, we have the knowledge of the attack of this APT, right, of the Triton. So we already knew what it was used for and what it was able to do. So for the moment when we start tagging the Triton thing, we will put the correct tags that are aligned to this approach. So it's going to be remote execution, it's going to be impairment of safety controller. So what is happening step by step right now is we're building up to the knowledge of the APT, and we are putting the tags that are related, because we assume that the execution of the signature they have is targeted to do the same thing, because the same code is going to execute the same impact on the device. So that's more or less the idea. We put down every scenario. We found out which are the precautions we have to take and which are the classic interpretations of the industry out there. So how the Triconex exploitation was used, and then we tag it with the correct tags. And then we present the alert with the following tags. And if there is an impaired movement in the ISO, let's say you see the execution, then the controller stops responding. So that's number 2. So then you have the other alert that says, okay, now this, it used to talk, now it's not talking anymore, so it's out of operation. So that's an extra alert, which is now you have impaired operational process, you have damage of the equipment or whatever.
Perfect. Perfect. So do you have anything else you want to add? It looks like we're running pretty low on time here, and we've gotten through most of the QA. There's a couple remaining questions which we could take offline, or if these folks want to reach out to somebody in our organization, either on the sales team or somewhere else, we'd be more than happy to answer those questions. Do you have anything else, Giannis, that you want to tell our viewers?
Well, generally, I think I'm set. I believe that MITRE is not an excellent solution for everything, but I think it's a good supporting tool for everything else that we're doing, both in the research part and the SOC part and the policy part of the organization. So I hope to see that this, the integration is going to be followed, and we will be able to take more advantages of it in the future.
Yep, totally agree with that. So thank you for an awesome session. Lots of great information, as always. Pleasure to be here with you, Giannis. And if anybody would like to get some further information on this topic, we have some Nozomi Networks resources available, both from our website, as well as there's a lot of good information on MITRE's site as well. On our site, we have some links to some previous blogs and some research reports, as well as some webinars that we've done on this topic. You can see some on your screen here. Also, I believe this deck is available for view later, but the main slide that you saw earlier is just the MITRE ATT&CK Framework, which you can get right from MITRE's site, along with a wealth of great information on it. So without anything else to add, Giannis, we shall bid farewell to our viewers. Thank you, everyone. We hope you stay safe and stay secure.
Thanks, everyone. Stay safe and see you next time.